The boarding school era is a massive stain on American history since young Indians were forcibly taken from their homes, were denied their rights as humans, and sent to abusive boarding schools where they were often malnourished and received a vastly below standard education. Carlisle Indian Industrial School was the first off-reservation Indian school founded by Lieutenant Richard Pratt in 1879 and operated until 1918. During that time, over 10,000 students from an estimated 140 tribes attended the school, yet only 158 graduated. Lieutenant Richard Henry Pratt founded Carlisle Indian Industrial School to try to nonviolently assimilate Native Americans into the white man's society and wanted to focus on helping them succeed, but sadly the Bureau of Indian Affairs refused to send food or supplies, making student labor a necessary part so that students could pay for food and supplies for each other and the entire school. The logic of events demands the absorption of the Indians into our national life not as Indians but as American citizens. The Indians must conform to the white man's ways, peaceably if they will, forcibly if they must. They must conform their mode of living substantially to our civilization. This civilization may not be the best possible, but it is the best the Indians can get. They cannot escape it and must either conform to it or be crushed by it. The tribal relations should be broken up, socialism destroyed, and the family and autonomy of the individual substituted. Thomas Jefferson Morgan, Commissioner of Indian Affairs, 1889. The main goal for the Native American boarding schools was to eradicate all things that made the Indians Indian, including their culture, language, and religion, and former identities. Punishment at the boarding schools was often severe and very painful, such as having the mouth washed with lye soap till it bled, beaten with belt or paddle, or even forced to crawl or do the chicken squat. Oftentimes punishments were given for small things such as being 5 or more minutes late for a meal. Thousands of Native Americans tragically lost their lives because of the Indian boarding school policy. In the years following the creation of Carlisle, the American government created hundreds of Indian boarding schools with the sole purpose and intention of stripping away all that is Indian within the students. The shackles shown were actually used to drag some of the Native American children to the boarding schools. There have been thousands of reports involving sexual abuse at the Indian boarding schools, oftentimes church-run ones, especially, it seems, especially in South Dakota. The government paid for forced sterilization of Native American women, and by 1976, 42% of Indian women were sterilized. The Native Americans were also forbidden from performing any of their traditional ceremonies, such as the green corn ceremony and any others, not only because of the boarding schools, but also because of some treaties and laws that were passed. They were also forbidden from eating traditional foods such as maize or using traditional medicines. They were forced to wear stuffy, militaristic uniforms, and their old clothing and old possessions were burned in a fire. In the 1912 Olympics, former Carlisle student Jim Thorpe, known as the world's greatest athlete, won the gold medals in both the pentathlon and the decathlon. At Carlisle University, he broke many records during track meets. The student body at the Indian schools was very diverse due to the fact that there were many tribes creating up the student body. At Carlisle alone, student body was comprised of over 3 dozen different Indian nations. Many feel that the harsh discipline and punishments, along with sexual abuse, caused the high rates of physical and sexual abuse in native tribes due to the students not learning how to take care of a family properly. Instead, they learned discipline and abuse. Due to the boarding schools, Native American tribes have a much higher rate of suicide, drug, and substance abuse. And also, the United States and Canadian government have offered millions of dollars in reconciliation to the tribes and Native Americans. The boarding schools were designed to strip away the culture and all things Indian from the students, and sadly succeeded in many cases, but there are a few cases where they failed, which is how we know of these stories, because of those survivors. As one can see from the evidence, the Indian boarding schools have and still are afflicting Native American culture. From the abuse to the culture loss and so much more I haven't discussed. Many have died because of this, and many more are still affected by this horror.